Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I'm very excited to be joined by Rabbi Adam Rubin, who starting July 1st will be the new senior rabbi at Beth Jacob Congregation. Rabbi Rubin talks about his path to the rabbinate, being a rabbi in this unprecedented era, and the secret to his homemade hummus on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Rabbi Adam Rubin, welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm delighted. Thank you for having me.
So you are currently in British Columbia, but you are going to be the new senior rabbi at Beth Jacob Congregation in Mendota Heights. So mazel tov on the job.
Thank you.
Excited to be welcoming you and getting to know you as you're getting ready to move to the Midwest. I guess for starters, tell us a little bit about why this job and what was it that made this move appealing to you?
Okay, sure. Thanks again for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you. And so I would say this, that, there was a great pull, a great attraction to Beth Jacob. It's a wonderful congregation. But to be honest, there was some push as well, by which I mean that my current congregation, as wonderful as it is quite small, and for complicated reasons I won't get into, there aren't many children in the congregation, and my wife Judith and I have two young kids, a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and we felt that we needed to make a move. It wasn't really viable for us to stay where we were in the long term, as much as we enjoy it and love it. And it's, it is really a beautiful part of the world, and it's interesting to be in Canada right now. But then with that in mind, I looked to find a job as a rabbi at another congregation, and Beth Jacob has a kind of legendary reputation. When I saw the job posting and read there, I told them that the job posting, which is very long and elaborate sort of description of their congregation, what they were looking for, it was sort of the platonic ideal of a rabbinic job description. I felt like I really had a sense of the place before I even applied. So there were a number of things that attracted me to both to that area and to the synagogue in particular. I'm a Californian. I have to admit, it wasn't the weather. I'm still a little nervous.
It almost never is the weather.
But you know what? I have to say, we're actually looking for. My kids love the white stuff, and we're looking forward to skating and sledding and everything. But in all seriousness, the time and again, people have told me, friends, fellow colleagues, that the Twin Cities are just an amazing place to raise a family. They have there's great culture there, and the Jewish community is. I'll tell you, when I told the head of the Federation in Vancouver that we were moving there, his mouth dropped. Literally, his jaw dropped. He said, "Oh, Minneapolis, St. Paul, that is the greatest Jewish community." And I'm not just saying this to
That's awesome. That's great.
It has a reputation of being very tight, very supportive, well organized, and just a really wonderful community. So we're very excited about those things. And then the community itself, Beth Jacob and Rabbi Morris Allen, who's retired recently, is within the conservative movement, a kind of legendary figure, and built up a remarkable community. By remarkable, I mean incredibly committed, devoted, a large group of people who are regulars, who really come and show up and contribute to the life of the synagogue. It's not a situation where I'm just sort of, as they say, the sage on the stage, the kind of rabbi, leading everything. This is truly a community that people care for each other. And, the davening, the praying and singing and teaching just are incredibly high level. So I feel very privileged to be able to go there. When I got the job, and again, told my friends, my rabbinic colleagues, I got one of two responses. One was either, "Oh my gosh, it's going to be the greatest. You're so lucky, mazel tov," or, "Wow, Rabbi Allen, big shoes to fill. Good luck to you."
And that's one of those. I'm a big sports fan, and there's the sports cliche. You don't want to be you don't want to be the one who replaces the legendary coach. You want to be the one who replaces the guy who replaced the legendary coach.
That's right.
But so
right.
You're the one who gets to replace. So
Yeah.
that is, yes, big shoes to fill, to be sure.
That's right.
Rabbi Allen is, incredible history and longevity with Beth Jacob. But you mentioned you're a Californian, so you're a lifelong West Coaster.
Lifelong. It's the first time I'll ever live away from the ocean. That's right.
We've got a lot of lakes. It's not quite the same thing.
I've also heard you have a lot of mosquitoes. That's the
one or two. It's fine. They're bad. They're bad. It won't. But I mean, it's not like you don't have mosquitoes in
no, we have mosquitoes
Vancouver?
here. So. Well, yes, although they're Canadian, so they're impeccably polite.
Yeah, no, here they're going to be a little more passive aggressive. So, but I digress. So, when are you're starting July technically?
That's right.
Starts?
That's right. So we're moving. People have asked about the move because the border is closed right now, right? So we're leaving in late June. We have, it's difficult. We have to fly, which I don't, it's not a great time to fly, certainly. But I think we thought better than driving for 3 days and in a small car with 2 young kids and staying in hotels and so on. So we'll be flying in late June. And my contract starts July 1st. We're very excited because we are hoping, God willing, or we're closing on a house soon in Mendota Heights, which we're very excited about. And, moving companies are working. So we were sort of surprised. There was not an issue. We got a contract with a moving company. And the fact is, because we're American citizens, it won't be a problem for us to go back into the United States. My current synagogue in Canada is hoping to hire a really wonderful rabbi from the United States, and she can't come here, right? Literally is not allowed to come into the country. So that is difficult. Hopefully those, things will loosen up a bit soon. But in any case, I think one of the challenges will be, as I'm sure moving's hard. Moving with kids is quite hard. But usually you'd have play dates, you'd have Shabbat meals, you'd have, and with COVID-19, I mean, Beth Jacob is doing a remarkable job in terms of getting ready for our arrival and supporting and helping us. It's just going to be hard. There's no doubt about it. So we'll just take each challenge as it comes.
In having kids in this time, you mentioned, I think before we started recording, it gets a little, they get a little stir crazy.
Yes.
I think even, us as adults, we also get a little stir crazy. Both of, I mean, your job and my job are obviously very different, but they both are, you have heavy reliance on talking to people and meeting with people and seeing people, and you don't have that right now. You can't have that right now. The in-person experience for both of us, and really almost every job right now, is lost to COVID-19. So, this has to be an interesting time, I think, to be a rabbi, but then also to tack on the transition of a new job and a new synagogue and a new state and a new time zone for the first time ever. That's got to be a whole other, it's got to be a whole other challenge at this point.
It's true. I gotta say, I really appreciate your laying it out that way. Now I'm even more nervous than I was. Sorry,
that's my bad.
No. I'm teasing. It's all true. I have to say, when my current synagogue, like most synagogues, is essentially closed. That is to say, we didn't have services, and people weren't coming into the building. I feared that, in a way, I sort of feared I'll be irrelevant. I'm not going to, how can I work? How can I do my job? And I know a number of my rabbinic colleagues I've spoken with mention this. And indeed, just this morning, I happened to be talking to Rabbi Harold Kravitz, who's there, obviously. He's been really lovely in reaching out to me and, helping to welcome me. And we were just talking this morning, and he said, the irony is, we're busier now than we've ever been. And it's true. I've been incredibly busy. When it first happened, I thought, what am I going to do? Fact is, we're all working hard to essentially transfer our, what we do, our service to the community to Zoom, to live streaming, to the computer, and that is difficult and awkward, it's time consuming. So I'm still teaching classes; they're just on Zoom, right? I'm still, I'm still doing, let's say, pastoral counseling, working with people, but it's by phone or by Zoom, right? Tefillot services, that's a whole other story, how we do that. And that's quite difficult. But I take your point. I just think it's going to be, there's not much we can do about it. It's just awkward. And we just have to kind of rise to the occasion. I mean, as I'm sure our people have faced many, many very difficult challenges throughout history. And, we can get through this, and we'll, hopefully come out even stronger at the end. But it is, it's occurred to me, how am I going to get to know my congregants? I mean, we'll figure out a way, but right. It will be difficult.
I sense you're going to be having a lot of, coffees over Zoom and FaceTime for a while to try to get to know people and settle.
That's exactly right. No, it's true. It's absolutely true. And, I'm also, you have the ability in normal times. I mean, I'm also a big sports fan, huge, particularly baseball, but, I'm a big sports person. And, we were already getting ready. I'm a Dodgers fan, so you're ready to go. The Dodgers are coming. We're going to come to Minnesota to play the Twins in late July. Yeah. I'd even looked into buying tickets. And, that would be a great way to come with some congregants, get a whole group to come. We can't do that. So that just seems like a minor thing. But, you play that out in a thousand different ways. So it will be challenging.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think it's going to be an interesting road ahead for, I think, everybody in a lot of fields, but particularly, I think synagogues and congregations, how they move forward is going to be one of the big,
that's right,
big stories that come out of this, for Judaism. You mentioned, and it's funny because I had another rabbi in town mention to me that they've been busier than they ever have been, because and I don't know if this is something you've noticed there, and I don't know how big your congregation is, but it seems that there is a thirst for, whether it's knowledge or just basic connection that people don't get outside of who they're sheltering in place with. Even as that's starting to relax a little bit,
that's right,
you still have that almost need to see other people and be around other people and experience other people. Is that something that your current congregation, that you're noticing with them as well?
Oh, absolutely. I'll just tell you that there's a bit of a debate, not to get into the weeds, but there's something of a debate about, if let's say you're going to have a davening, whether it's weekday or even with all the restrictions on Shabbat, what you use. Do you use live streaming or Zoom, right? And I mention this, it's directly related to your question, because, the problem with live streaming is that it's one way, right? You're looking at a screen and you're just seeing people daven. Whereas Zoom has this sort of horizontal connection. You can see others and hear them. It's a bit of a mess, right? It can be unwieldy and not work so well sometimes. But there's really a great thirst for people to connect and get out of that sense of isolation. So it's really come up. This is an ongoing conversation in the conservative movement about which works best. And certainly Zoom responds, I think, to that need for communal connection. But I'll just say one other thing, which is that, quite honestly, I mean, I worry. I'm not the first person to say this. Rabbi Kravitz and I were talking about it, and Rabbi David Wolpe, a prominent figure in the conservative movement, wrote about this, that, what's going to happen when it's all over, by which I mean, you might think that after we're able to gather again, may that day be soon, speedily, may it come speedily in our day, you would think, well, people can't wait to be together, right? So they're going to rush back into shuls so we can connect physically. And I hope that's true. But it is also the case, let's face it, that you can get used to this and that it's quite easy. And I've heard from several people that their attendance at Morning Minyan is much higher since this all started, because, you're at home, you just click on a computer and you're right there. And I just, I think a number of people are worried that it'll be another screen thing, right? We do so much on the screen. There's an app for that, right?
Yeah.
And God forbid we'll have to worry about ratings, right? So it's our tendency to worry a bit, but we'll see. I hope the need for community means that people want to be physically together again, and that will prove to be the case.
I couldn't agree more, but I do think, and I hope we don't ever get used to this, because this is not really enjoyable. I hope you're right. Yeah. But I think it's nice that it provides a level of accessibility that may not, be there otherwise for people to be able to attend.
That's right.
Whether it's a morning minyan, a shiva, something across the country that.
That's right.
They would like to attend but can't. Sure.
We'll take, for example, an adult education class, right? So let's say it's January. Mm-hmm. It's Minnesota, right? I'm teaching an adult ed class now. It's not easy for people. Let's say it's Tuesday night at 7:30 for people to schlep to the synagogue. So it's something to consider. Would I still have people come, but then those people who prefer to do it, by computer? I mean, it makes it, because the fact is it is easier and more convenient. Which you lose the. I find it difficult sometimes to teach by Zoom. It's you're losing something. On the other hand, it can really work for people. So maybe we can, to make lemonade out of lemons and take something from it.
And I do. I mean, and it is a mess sometimes. I mean, I would think back to the. Well, actually, really, I was trying to think of whether it was the first Seder or the second Seder, but it was really both Passover Seders, trying to do the blessings, and everybody does it at their own pace. And in the end, like somebody stops, whether it's us at home waiting for somebody else to catch up or somebody at one of the other sites waiting for somebody, the third party to catch up. And we were in 4 different locations for our second Seder, and I think probably it was 6 or 7 different locations for the first one. So, I mean, it was a mess. It was,
that's right.
It was laugh about it, because what else are you going to do?
Right. So try, leading a service with 100 people. Right. That's right. It's complete. There's a very funny Saturday Night Live skit that came out a few weeks ago. It's an African-American preacher who's trying to lead a service by Zoom.
It was incredible.
It's so funny. Can I get an amen? And then it's just a mess. And then everybody's muted, and they start singing Amazing Grace, and you can't hear a thing because everybody's muted. And he gets very frustrated. It's not easy. I like to say, I hate Zoom, but it's the best of a number of, bad choices.
Right.
So, we just do the best we can.
And I'm sure as that skit aired, you're watching that as a rabbi going, I know that.
Oh, completely. Absolutely.
Certainly,
Absolutely.
I would imagine. I mean, I watched that thinking of all of, my rabbinic friends going, they absolutely have to.
That's right.
Have to commiserate with this skit. It's a little close to home.
Exactly. It was funny and painful, no doubt.
So, as I can see by the books behind you, you have not started packing yet.
You're really doing a great job to make me feel.
No, listen. We're terrible. We're terrible at packing.
Right.
And I could tell you some stories about just how bad we were at packing. Right. And as we're throwing stuff. When we lived in Chicago, my wife and I, we moved from one apartment to the other, and we're literally throwing stuff into garbage bags as the movers are finishing getting out of the house. Yeah, we're settled into our house in Plymouth, and we're not, we've declared we're not moving again.
We are moving again. Yes.
No, we're bad at it.
Absolutely.
And I have no interest in doing it.
No, for sure. I mean, look, to tell you the truth, I like to say we're in the purging stage. We're doing great at purging.
Yes.
We have our boxes and our tape, the pack tape ready to go. So you're right. I do have serious moving. On a serious note, I would say that we do have a lot of work to do. But on a serious note, I would say that one of the things we're really excited about and looking forward to is we hope and pray this will be our last move for a very long time. I really want to dig in roots, both of us do, and stay there. We've moved a number of times in the last few years. So I was an academic before I became a rabbi, and I was in Los Angeles, and then made a career switch, became a rabbi, and my first job was as an assistant rabbi in Seattle.
Okay.
And that was a 3-year gig, and I knew it was just going to be there for 3 years. So we moved to Seattle, and we're there for 3 years. Then we moved here, where I'm, speaking from the Vancouver area. I thought it would be for a long time, but as I said, it just didn't work out. So now, one more move, and it's not easy for children. We want to give them a sense of continuity and roots and stability. So, again, one of the things we're really looking forward to is how, I can't tell you how many times we've heard it's just a great place to to establish roots and to raise a family. So we're hoping it's, whether I become a Vikings fan or not, that's another story, but, we'll see.
Oh, that's fair. I'm from Michigan originally, so I am a fan of all teams Detroit still,
Gotcha.
and they're all awful.
Yes, they are. Actually.
It's not a good time to be a Detroit.
It's a lot
sports
of pain.
fan.
It's
a significant amount of pain. But part of the problem is that all of the big two, baseball and football, are in the same division as my Detroit team. So I could never be a Vikings or a Twins fan.
Gotcha.
I will just suffer along as a Detroit.
Stay true to your Michigan roots. Stay loyal.
Absolutely. So I did want to ask you, though, you mentioned the switch you made from academia to the rabbinic side. You had graduated UCLA. You had a degree of was Israeli history. Is that
modern Jewish history?
Modern Jewish history.
Yeah. And I focused on Israel. That's right.
Okay. So what was it that sort of spurred you? Was there an aha moment that led you to want to switch?
Yeah. This is a very good question. I'm not sure I'd say there was an aha moment. I would say it took me too long to make the switch. And here's what I mean. I think when you, I'm generalizing, but for many people, when you take a long time to build a career, and especially if it involves a lot of education, as I got to get my doctorate, it took forever. My identity was very much invested in being an academic and being a professor. That's sort of who I was. And there were parts of it I really enjoyed. But it seemed to me over time to be increasingly obvious that it wasn't right for me. I sort of wait, this is who I am. I am Professor Rubin. This is the kind of person I am. But in fact, it wasn't working for me. And I think it was primarily because, academics, the main thing you do, when you're a scholar, the job is to produce knowledge, to research, to be in archives and libraries. And the people I know who were successful, and I know a number of successful academics, they had what's called in German Sitzfleisch, meaning, a tush that they could sit down and work. And they loved the subject so much. They were very disciplined. And they would sit in those libraries and go to those archives and work. And I just never really had it. It was too isolating for me. I love being with people, and I like the teaching. But the fact is, the teaching is just a small part of it. It's really mostly sitting in front of a computer screen and writing and doing research. And I was able to do it. I would not say I was great at it, but I did what I had to do. But I just didn't really love it. It felt too isolating for me. And I taught at a rabbinical seminary, actually, a Reform rabbinical seminary, and they required that we work in the Jewish community and volunteer. And I always was that was my favorite part of the job. I was on such a high when I go to a Hadassah chapter or whatever and do some teaching. I absolutely loved it. And then at a certain point, and meanwhile, I was involved in Jewish life and observance and Torah study and all of that in my own personal life. At a certain point, it just said, what am I doing? The stuff I love, I can actually do professionally. And I can bring those two worlds together. So thank God I have a remarkably supportive and understanding wife. It's not easy when you have a little toddler and a second one on the way. And you say, honey, I'm going back to school. Not only that, I'm going to be a rabbi, right? That is not an easy sell. But it was really interesting. She knew. She just instantly, well, hello, of course. She sort of saw it coming. And it was quite difficult, but she was very, very supportive. And I was able to sort of work all the practical requirements and make it happen. But so, yeah, I wouldn't say there was one aha moment. It was sort of gradual. And I wish I had done it earlier. I'm very happy I made the move.
It does seem like being a rabbi gives you the you get to write when you want to write. I mean, obviously you write sermons on a regular basis, but at least you'll be sharing the pulpit where you won't have every week responsibilities, but you'll get to write, you'll get to teach. There is sort of I know rabbis don't like to think of it as a performance, but there is the performative element, being on the bima in front of people the way you would be in front of a class, while being a professor. There is that element of it.
No, there are things in common, for sure.
Yeah, but you don't have to worry about tenure. You don't have to worry about publishing, all of that really hard.
You have to worry about other things, but
there's other worries, but it feels like it pulls the elements you like without the.
That's right. I mean, the fact is, I actually loved and still love reading, academic scholarship on Judaism, and have immense respect for what historians and other scholars, literary scholars, and so on do. And I feel like I have a number of very dear friends still in that world. We're very happy doing it. So I have one foot in it still to a degree. But I think for me, I had this, here's an aha moment of a different kind. When I finally became a rabbi, and then we moved to Seattle, the second night on the job, I was called by the senior rabbi because a congregant had delivered a child, and the child was gravely ill and in danger of dying. And it was almost midnight. And she said, I'm going to go to the hospital and be with the family. You want to come with me? And I said, well, yes, I need to learn how to do this. And I felt very inexperienced, an academic still in my head. So we went, we both went, thank God the child survived, has challenges, but survived. But, in that hospital room, dealing with the parents, and it was so, it was obviously very sad and painful and frightening, but, very meaningful, very raw and human. And I felt like that was exactly what I had been missing, just for me. This doesn't apply to everyone. But for me as an academic, there was a kind of fact that we can try to bring some little bit of support and spirituality and meaning in this trying time, desperate time for this family, was very, very powerful. And that was the second day on the job, right? So I felt, that along with a million other things, smachot, weddings, even funerals. I mean, all of it. I just felt was, I feel really, really blessed and honored I get to do that work and work with people in that way. So it was definitely the right move for me. I feel like I'm just really glad, like I said, that I had the support and was able to pull it off practically. Many times people are unhappy in their jobs and they can't make the change. You're paying a mortgage. Mm-hmm. Kind of that's it. So I do not take this for granted.
And it's interesting. I tell my kids are sort of grumble about sometimes not wanting to know what they want to do when they grow up. They're 15 and 11, and I said, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up either. Right. And they're like, you are grown up, which
questionable.
It depends on the day, I suppose. It said somewhat tongue in cheek. I mean, I've wanted to be a journalist since I was, probably 6 years old. I realize a lot of pressure to sort of settle into something right away.
That's right.
And I think, that's not always the right thing for people. And clearly you found that it wasn't right for you.
That's right. I think that's true. I think it's, there may have been a time, I think back after saying stereotypically in the 1950s or something, somebody would get a job at IBM and that would be their job and they would work their whole lives there. And nowadays, I think, people, my understanding is that people statistically, they tend to change quite often. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. I think, I would say my wife has been a lifelong, very skilled elementary school teacher, but she's thinking seriously of making a move into the world of public health and is looking at the University of Minnesota. They have a wonderful program there, a master's degree. So I think, she too might make a big switch. And I think, this is as long, it can be difficult practically, the expense and you have children. But if it's possible, I agree with you 100%. So, people change, their interests change, we grow, and sometimes our careers have to shift along with it.
No, absolutely. Well, Rabbi Adam Rubin, thank you so much for joining us. We have last two questions though before we let you get on your way.
Absolutely.
Sort of along in the vein of the really difficult get to know you stuff. So, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's actually not so tough. I would say my favorite Jewish holiday is Sukkot.
Okay, how come?
I love Sukkot. Well, we have a sukkah. We build it in our backyard every year. I love it's Man Simchatenu. It's time of our joy. I love the smells. I love the time of year. I love the physicality of it. Right? You're out in this sometimes tenuous, unstable booth, waving the lulav and etrog. The singing, the meals, it's relentlessly social particularly if you have a sukkah. And it's just totally joyful after the intensity of Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, which is also, very powerful. But
sure.
After that, then you have this right after Yom Kippur. And it's this, you start, when I was in LA living in Pico Robertson area, we would, literally the day after Yom Kippur, go look for the lulav and etrog. They had these stands in the streets. It was just this transition. So I just love, I feel like it's in some ways the kind of paradigm or archetype of a Jewish holiday of combining spirit with the physical, with the concrete. And I love that. So hands down, Sukkot.
Okay. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
Oh gosh. Boy, there's so many.
There's a lot.
Not to brag, but I'm about to brag, which is
Please.
That I am the primary cook in our family. My wife has many skills in lots of areas, but I am the cook. And I tend to make, I love it. I lived in Israel for quite a long time.
Okay.
I feel very closely connected to it. And so I make hummus every Friday for Shabbat. So I would say it's sort of a tie. I would say a really good shakshuka, an Israeli dish, right? Sort of tomatoes and eggs, spicy. Love that. And then I'm going to go Ashkenazi and traditional. I mean, a good roast chicken on a Friday night. If done right, I absolutely love it. So I would say, shakshuka, a really good roast chicken with kind of some garlic going on there. That does it for me. That's as good as it gets.
All right, so I got to ask you about your hummus then before we get away from this.
Don't get me started.
I want to get you started. What do you have your own recipe? Is there somebody? Have you found somebody else's recipe?
Right.
What do you?
So
what
there is
the huge.
Make? All right. So this is. I'm so glad you asked. We should have a separate podcast just on hummus. And in fact, a congregant who also makes hummus and is very proud of it says we're going to have a hummus off when I come, sort of competition to see which one is better. Blind.
We would love to. We would love to be involved in that.
So I would say, look, there are certain classic ingredients. You have obviously chickpeas, tahina, garlic, lemon juice, salt, some olive oil, perhaps. Some people like cumin. I don't add cumin. But I would say a key thing is that you have to let it, first of all, it has to be in the food processor for a long time, like 5 minutes to get it really creamy. But the most important thing, in my view, is it is not chickpea paste. There has to be a lot of tahina in there, a lot. And that makes it really creamy and sort of balances the chickpeas. So, but I would say, there's something of a controversy in my hummus because the purists will take the raw chickpeas, boil them for 3 hours. And so I just use canned. I don't have time for that. I think the real chickpeas are probably better. That's what I've heard. Yeah. But I find canned to be perfectly fine. So I hope that gives you enough information.
It's great information. And if there is the great Beth Jacob Hummus cook-off, I will volunteer to be a judge. I will take one for the team.
Game on. You'd be invited. I welcome it.
I can't wait. Well, Rabbi Adam Rubin, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to your arrival in the Twin Cities, and hopefully we will be able to meet in person all too soon. But thank you.
Thank you.
Best
Thank
of
you
luck
so
to
much.
you and your family with the move.
Thank you very, very much. I'm delighted to join you, and I really appreciate the invitation. I can't wait to get there.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.